It really is so interesting how much we learn when we take on an endeavor like building something from scratch, and especially when there are models out there, even though you could base your own project off of those models, taking your own route and really just trying to learn something from scratch and learning as much as you possibly can about it. There's something very wildly fascinating in that to me, and this is something that I've come across while building a podcast. The Awaken Space podcast is something I started building last year, and it was something I realized that could help a lot of people. I'm a psychology major, and I enjoy sharing ideas and advice with people, in an attempt to help people better their lives on many different levels, both psychology and spiritually. And so with that, I think it's important to also explore the process of what it means to put together a podcast, and not just put together a podcast, not just starting a podcast, but at the same time maintaining a podcast, and the kind of work that goes into that, and the kind of things that people really aren't more so aware of, the things that go into building anything at all. Running the podcast has been easily one of the most challenging things for me, as it requires, probably going along the lines of something new each week, adding value to people's lives through something new on either a personal or a spiritual standpoint. And while it can be efficient to reach out to people in an attempt to see what it is that people want to hear, what people want to listen to, it's also very challenging too, because people don't always respond. The art of creating a podcast for me is simple. My intention is to bring the absolute best value to people's lives. And of course, along this journey, I've gotten a lot of really incredible feedback from people. And because it's so important for me to get it to that level of adding that kind of value, so of course, I'm open-minded and I'm ready to receive anything and everything. So I've sat down with quite a few people to get the best absolute input for running this podcast, and I'm grateful. The feedback that I got ultimately helped me to shape it into what it is now. And while I was doing a podcast episode every single day, after the feedback that I got, I realized that it would be beneficial to add more value in lesser episodes, which is why I decided to take it from every single day to only every Sunday. And so the process for me putting together a podcast episode is simple. As my intention is to bring the best value to you, the listener, what I have to do for that is to make sure that I'm getting the best value. To make sure that I'm getting the absolute best value so that I can provide the absolute best value to you, the listeners, is researching. I take all my notes, I do all my research. So just to give more insight as to how I run this podcast, my weapon of choice for running a podcast is called Anchor. This is not sponsored by Anchor, but Anchor is an incredible way to put together a podcast that distributes all your stuff for free, and you can sponsor your podcast on them. It's amazing. Of course, I will end up ultimately putting together a studio for myself, but this is what I do in the meantime. Headphones in, mic up, talk, just like that. So yes, I have definitely made posts on social media about asking people to reach out to me to, maybe talk about what it is that they would like to listen to, and, what they'd like to hear, what kind of advice they'd like to hear. And the beautiful thing about, personal and spiritual podcasts is that it's not just about growth and expansion. There's so much art that goes into all of this stuff. I'm an artist, I'm a visual artist, and that's one of the most important parts to me. And so, easily one of the most challenging aspects of putting together these posts, putting out episodes, is wondering if I'm ever going to get feedback on this stuff, wondering if I'm going to hear from people who want to hear more of the stuff that I have to say. And I've definitely faced challenges with, putting out a post, saying grateful, let me try that again, saying something along the lines of, so grateful for your support, please let me know how I can add value to your life through these episodes. And the challenge in that is that people often don't reply. And so I kind of have to go based on whatever it is I think would be interesting for people to hear, assumptions and everything. Individually reaching out to people and asking what it is that they'd like to hear. And fortunately, I've reached out to a few people and I've gotten feedback. I've gotten responses based on what they'd like to hear. And so I just wanted to share, as kind of like a storytelling aspect of it, some of the challenges that I face as a podcast runner, as someone who is really looking to add the absolute best value to people's lives through this. Because the fact of the matter is that I take pages and pages worth of notes. I do all of my own research. It's a lot of work, but it is so rewarding. And that is why I do it. I do it because it brings me to life. It brings so much value to my life, knowing that I'm able to put this stuff together, knowing that I have a voice for people that enjoy listening to it. I've gotten great feedback on behalf of it, and I'm super grateful for that. And with that, I'm truly grateful to be in the position that I am as a podcast owner and runner. Let's go into the backstory. I'm wildly fascinated by the amount of posts that I can put on social media and still have people not knowing the fact that I have a podcast. Aside from the fact that there is this algorithm that, decides what gets the highlight or what gets the spotlight and what doesn't. I don't even know if Awaken Space is getting that. But just to give some backstory, I was definitely challenged by trying to figure out a name to use for the podcast for a while. So I started off with something like, I went with Transcendence. That was one of them. Another one was The Great Beyond. I was just trying to think of very, psychological and spiritual kind of meanings and stuff. And it was interesting because some of them stuck for a while, some of them really didn't. Some of them I was like, I like it and I want to, but I can't because no. And so it kind of just ended up not being. I think that there was one more name that I used. I used so many different names in an attempt to just really stick with one of them. And then, of course, I approached my father on behalf of it, and I was like, I'm kind of struggling with this, and I feel like I'm overcomplicating it. Let's try to simplify it. What do you think would be a good name for it? And he was like, Awaken Space. But the reason that he said this is because he knows about my backstory as an artist. Back in 2012, as I was trying to find my place as an artist, I came along with Awake in Space. Awake was spelled A-W-A-Y-K-E. This was my attempt to kind of fit myself into the whole graffiti universe, because as a graffiti artist, you usually pick a name based on, I'm getting a little too far into this, but just to finish off here, as a graffiti artist, you tend to pick a name based on like the lettering and stuff, just so it can be really cool. And then you just try to throw that extra letter into it that, it still works out, but it makes it feel different. It gives it a different effect. So that's why I went with Awake. And then In Space came along, and this was me basically exploring psychological things in my mind as I was starting to go through very serious, profound transformational growth. Say that 5 times fast. And so I approached him on behalf of it, and he was like, why not do this? Awaken Space. Awaken, A-W-A-Y, am I saying this right? A-W-A-Y-K-E-N, there we go, space, just like that. And so I found it very interesting, and there was something so subtle and perfect about it that I just could not resist it. And I was just like, this is it. This is it. This is the name. This is the podcast. And to be completely honest with you, there are some times where I'm like, should I take that Y out of there? No. It wouldn't be what it is if I took that Y out of there. And so it is what it is, and I love it, and I'm grateful that I had that experience, because if I hadn't really been challenged by grounding myself with a name seriously, I don't know what to say. I really don't know what to say. I don't know where it would be today. I don't know if I would have been so consumed by trying to figure out a name for it that I wouldn't have done anything with it, and it would have just been sitting there on Anchor doing nothing with no episodes recorded. So absolute radical action is one of the most important parts of this. Because if you don't take radical action, chances are you're just not going to move. You're just not going to do anything. And that's one of the scariest things about it too. When you just don't do anything about it and it just sits there, dead, not fun. Not fun at all. These are some of the challenges that come along with building anything. It's not just running a podcast. It's not just starting a podcast from scratch. It's building absolutely anything. There we go. And just realizing that it's not always going to just come. It's not going to be easy. There are going to be things that you're going to have to do. You're going to have to say no to going to movies. You're going to have to say no to watching shows with your beautiful significant other, girlfriend, whatever you want to call it. You're gonna have to say no to things that you want to do in the moment because it's easy, because you really want to build this beautiful thing that can be successful as long as you put in the work. And that's what it's all about. This is why I'm documenting, because this is probably all going to change someday. Or it's not. Who knows? We will see. I go to the Anchor app, tools, new episode, record, and then we're in. And now this is recording. So basically I'm just trying to document this because I know that this is all going to be very different someday. And I want this for keep's sake. I want this for the sake of being able to look back at it and being able to smile and laugh and, just be grateful and proud of myself. Grateful for the fact that I ever started. Proud of myself for the fact that I've been consistent and persistent with it, and just really in love with the process, because that's what it's all about. It's all about being humble. It's all about realizing that this is a creation. This is something that I'm bringing into existence, that I'm creatively birthing into existence, and something that I do believe at some point in time, maybe if it's not even right now, maybe if I don't have the highest listenership right now, and I'm okay with that, because things take time to build up. The process is huge and it takes time. And I do really believe that everything I'm doing here with the Awakened Space podcast will really impact the lives of many. Maybe it'll take months on end. Maybe it won't even have, months to take. Maybe it takes years. Maybe it doesn't blow up until 10 years later. Who knows? What matters is that I believe in the process. What matters is that I know that I can do it. And that's why I'm documenting this, because there's something very beautiful about going through this all and realizing that there's so much beauty in this, and that just being transparent here and vulnerable, honestly, I was thinking about documenting this, and I was like, well, that's kind of you really want to show that? It's yeah, I do. I want to be vulnerable and show how potentially early I am in the process, and just kind of expose that, because it's fun, and because it shows growth, it shows story, it shows everything that this is, and that's what matters to me. And so there was actually a point before this when I wasn't even putting notes together. I got feedback. I went through trial and error. And I still will. Of course, there's going to be a point when, maybe this is kind of feeling salty or something. Maybe it's, a little bit dull. Maybe there's something that I want to add to it. Maybe there's something that I want to change. Maybe there's someone watching this video right now who's going to end up on this show, who I'm going to be interviewing and asking questions. Maybe there's a personal trainer, life coach, psychologist, an artist, a scientist, anything, anything can happen. And that's what I think is so cool about this, about the ability to connect with people on such a large scale through social media. And we literally live in the greatest era of all time with so much unbelievable opportunity. That's why I'm doing this. Because, you know, whether I do years down the line or maybe months, depending on the growth and the action that I take, you know, maybe I will end up in, you know, my own office with a massive awaken space sign on the side, you know, with you know, like some meditator or something. I don't know, but it's really cool to just document, and that's what it's all about, and that's what I'm excited to share, because that's what I identify and connect with. It is all about the story.